Hello, everybody, and welcome to the National Atomic Testing Museum's Distinguished Lecture webinar featuring Stanley Paher. Tonight, Stanley is going to be speaking about Southern Nevada ghost towns and historic sites. And so we're excited to have you all visiting us today and joining us for this wonderful lecture with Stanley. So first, what I want to do is introduce Stanley, and then we'll get right into his presentation. Now, a native Las Vegas, Stanley is with us this evening. He is a member of pioneer Southern Nevada family who settled here in 1932. At the onset of the construction of the Boulder or Hoover Dam, he has authored 18 books since he graduated from Las Vegas High School in 1958, excuse me. Over the last 50 years, he has influenced every conceivable part of the Nevada book universe as an author and publisher. And in the 1980s, he penned a weekly column for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. In 2012, the state's Board of Regents conferred upon him the Distinguished Nevadan Award in recognition of his achievements and cultural advancements in service to the state. Stan stopped publishing new books 6 years ago, an attempt towards semi-retirement. But Stan admits that he has not done a very good job of it. He still distributes more than 100 Nevadan books, and every summer finds himself doing a lot of desert hiking, jeeping, and tent camping. So it's with my great honor on behalf of the National Atomic Testing Museum to introduce Mr. Stanley Paher.
Thank you for coming tonight. There'll be a lot of people on Zoom, I'm sure. I came here about a little over 18 months ago, and we had a talk on Las Vegas history, and well attended, but I can understand what's going on right now. It's tough on everybody. Tonight, we're going to spend about 38 minutes on Southern Nevada mining camps and historic sites. As Joe introduced me, my family dates back to 1932, coming here to Las Vegas. My mother came in 1938, and just a short little piece here. This is the town of Johnny as it was about 20 years ago. Johnny is the north end of end of Pahrump Valley. Or the mining camp of Johnny is at the northern end of Pahrump Valley. And my mother lived out there and was cooking for the Johnny mine when she came into Las Vegas and stayed at the Gateway Auto Court, which was at 5th and Charleston, now Las Vegas Boulevard, of course. And my dad saw her come, and my dad had another motel on Fremont Street that's still there. And my dad wondered where this woman from Johnny, named Dorothy, that's my mother, where did she go? Oh, she went back to her home. Well, where's the home? Johnny. And there's Johnny there 20 years ago. And that building now is down. And so my dad went out there and courted my mother at this ghost town. And I guess it rubbed off on me because I'm best known for books on and maps on ghost towns. So that's just a personal thing, and we'll get right into other things here. Around the year 1900, Las Vegas was nothing but a ranch down there on Las Vegas Boulevard North. And we went over that when I was here a year and a half ago about the history of early Las Vegas in connection with that ranch. But around 1900, there was big gold strikes and silver strikes at Tonopah Goldfield, and it opened up all of Southern Nevada as well. And so the big thing is, when there's mines, you got to have railroads. And so this is a construction crew of the Tonopah Tidewall Railroad running from south of Baker all the way through Baker, of course, Amargosa Canyon to Death Valley to Beatty and Goldfield. And then another railroad took off from what became Las Vegas in 1905, called the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad. And some of that railroad bed is still seen here. But this construction crew here is trying to determine the route of that Tonopah Tidewater Railroad. Very rare shot. Animals over here. We're hauling other wagons. This man here is surveying the route of the Tonopah Tidewater Railroad south of Death Valley Junction, which is about from the it's just east of Death Valley and west of US 395. You can see they sleep on the ground over here in the lower right picture here. Death Valley had its share of mining camps as well. The big boom started, of course, in Tonopah down to Goldfield and Beatty, the Rhyolite area, and we'll be talking about that. But there were mining camps over in Death Valley itself. Greenwater is the coming town. That's the kind of superlative language used. And the last part of the first paragraph, all the copper in that area will mount into the billions of dollars. Invest in Greenwater because it's the coming town. Other towns were Leadfield, Skadoo, and further south there was Calico and so forth. And now Greenwater. So these people from the east would invest in Greenwater securities, and these Greenwater, the Greenwater Furnace Mining Corporation, the Greenwater Original, the Greenwater this. But if any of those investors back east, what they put their hard-earned money in investing in Greenwater, it'd come out. This is all they would see. And just the Greenwater mining camp was hardly much bigger than this. It did have the Greenwater Times newspaper and the Death Valley Chuckwalla, a magazine for men. That's totally different from what we see in the late 20th century. A magazine for men, published on the desert, on the brink of Death Valley, mixing dope, cool from the desert and high from the mountain and cool from the mountains. And these are, it only published about 10 issues, but they're collector's items. They're worth about $500 today. Now, pardon?
The dope, mining the dope, D-O-P-E.
Oh, mining dope. Well, dope is an old word for information. You know, for instance, you might say, "What's the latest dope?" Or you can put a comma in, "What's the latest comma dope?" So, but this is Death Valley Junction, which is about 20 miles south of Lathrop Wells on US 95, now Amargosa, the town of Amargosa. But from here, a railroad ran west into the top of the range east of Death Valley itself. And now the railroad that ran 20 miles west of the standard gauge Tonopah Tidewater was narrow gauge, and therefore you'd see everywhere 3 rail tracks. Because if it's just narrow gauge for that road running west, they had to use the inside rail. The one mining camp just southwest of that Death Valley Junction is the town of Ryan. And again, a little promotion there, but this picture was taken in the 1920s. And there's just parts of these buildings left and foundation at Ryan. And then there was a new Ryan later on built further west of this Death Valley Junction. And that lasted for a long time and employed about 300 people. Another mining camp was on the west side of Death Valley, west of the Panamint Range, in Panamint Valley called Skadoo. And if you go to this town site today, there's not a single building left. There are lots of cellars up there. But going to Skadoo, you have to go through Death Valley and come back down on the on the east side of the Panamint Range. And you go up there and they've got a complete restored stamp mill. Those mills were crushers to get the ore down to concentrates where they were treated later. But it was quite a mining camp. Now, one thing that I've been doing most of my life is some fairly strenuous hiking. You can imagine the steepness of this trail to get to the Blue Bucket Mine, and that was over from Beatty. It'd be about 30 miles south, but just barely in California. It's only a couple of mile hike, but you can see how steep it is. But once we got to the Blue Bucket Mine, you can see all kinds of implements that were there. Buckets here for to haul the ore from mine to the mill, and also other wagon stuff. No one's going to come and take this away. It's just so remote that there was all kinds of assay materials there at the Bucket. Here's a picture of the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad running into Beatty. It stopped in Indian Springs, Las Vegas, went into a place called Amargosa on US 95, and this train is rounding the bend, heading in toward Beatty, which was a stop on the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad. This one here is another one. You can imagine the steam engine here coming into what's called the Bullfrog District, and that would be Beatty and Rhyolite. I'm sure that many of you people have been to Rhyolite. It's just a very common place. Timetable on the railroad running from Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, transferring way down to the LV&T, that's the Las Vegas and Tonopah Railroad, Las Vegas, Indian Spring, Rose's Well, all stops. They're all dead towns now, ghost towns. Rhyolite itself sprang up in 2002, and it was a tent city at first. And this is the evolution of a mining camp, is that usually tents would spring up first, and then along come from wood frame buildings. And Rhyolite is heavily visited today. It's just west of Beatty, about 3 miles. And then those wooden buildings will after they were torn down, maybe stone and brick buildings would go up in Rhyolite. Here is a prospector at Rhyolite in the wintertime. Don't you wish we had some of that cool right now, the snow on the mountains? But this prospector here is typical, but we'll see some more prospectors here. He's not going very far with little he's got packing, but other prospectors would want to stay out 2 weeks and they'd pack a lot. The Rhyolite District was discovered by Eddie Cross and Shorty Harris. We'll see Shorty Harris on the trail in a minute, but look how primitive his tent dwelling was. A very poor picture, but he's got mementos of memories in former homes, pictures of family. And look at the crude desk over here on the lower right, and he's sitting on a chair here. But he made some money, and then he retired down in Southern California. Now here's Shorty Harris, just barely off the picture. Now this guy is going out for 10 to 14 days. He's got all kinds of things. He's got in the first jack right there on the right, a big box, some dynamite, and he's got some foodstuffs carefully behind the canvas, and whiskey, of course. And then further down, he's got buckets and prospector's tools and more whiskey. Because if you're gone 10 days, you need a lot of fuel for yourself.
That's what the whiskey is, right?
Yeah. Here in Rhyolite itself, here's a prospector's outfit ready to go out. And that's what prospectors like to do. The thrill for them was not so much developing mines and things like that. It was going out and finding the first discovery or early discovery. And he's ready to do it. Little variation of the other picture I showed you. Now, Senator William Stewart was one of Nevada's first 2 senators when Nevada became a state in 1864. And he served 3 terms. And then he retired for a while, but he came back in 1892 as a member of the Silver Party. And then when he retired after 2 more terms, he lived out his last days out at Rhyolite. You can see he's aged here. And his law office still has part of the walls still remaining in the lower end of Rhyolite. There's his law office, and there is Senator Stewart on the right. One of Nevada's longest lived senators. Now, these Eastern people not only were investing heavily in Western mines, Nevada, California, Arizona, but some of them would actually come out, like Charles Schwab, a very famous name in economics and finance. And he, when Charles Schwab would come out, he'd stay at the Southern Hotel in Rhyolite because it had private baths and private rooms. Some other hotels, you might be bunking up with someone, a stranger, whatever, but the Southern was a place where the big shots came out and stayed there. Look at that old car. Now this guy right here in Rhyolite, he knows how to sell. Look at it. It is a strap, and you can see a strap. That's another old word, like dope. Remember, we went over that about 15 minutes ago. What's the latest dope? What's the latest information? Is it a strap? In other words, it's a strapping goodbye. The English language changes so much that a lot of phrases and words just drop out. That I will give you, this is no bull, nor pipe dream, St. Gray. Come here. And he's right way over here. He's barely inside of his tent there, and he's just waiting for you so he can get some money out of you. You buy something. If you can't see it, it's not for sale. That's a sign over there. Parades in Rhyolite. Mining camps love parades. And this is Golden Street. The big bank that's still there with 3 stories would be just off the picture to the left. And part of that other building on the lower left was the doctor's office in Rhyolite. And then 4 or 5 months later, there'd be construction of the Las Vegas and Tonopah Depot, which still stands in Rhyolite, up on the upper right part of the street. And another shot of the same street. And now with the number 2 would be that 3-story bank building I was talking about. But number 1, just to the left over here, would be the Overberry Bank. So Rhyolite had about 4 banks, and it was going good for about 6-7 years. And then ore deposits got weaker and weaker, and people left. It had about 4,000 people at one time. And in 1910, the census, it was down to 700. And now it's probably only about 8 or 9 people living there. Inside that 3-story bank, this is a very rare shot of the interior. I found it down near San Bernardino, amidst of other Rhyolite pictures. And the banker's over on the right, and he's got a telephone over there next to him. Telephone service in Rhyolite, yes, 1907. Here's the assistant cashier over here. Apparently, up on the upper right is maybe the invoice department, but it's a rare shot, and I was glad to find it. Next door to that 3-story bank building was the doctor's office. Here's the interior, and they're having a good time, just like we're having a good time from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Thanksgiving Day dinner, and you can see evidence of a female with all the nice decorations there, heading it up. One of the most famous characters in the Death Valley country was Death Valley Scotty. And he is on the left here with a woman, right near that 3-story bank in the background. And they're just sitting out there smoking while in the middle of the street, side street in Rhyolite, because the main street was always very, very busy. Now, Rhyolite was a town that it drew some classy people. You can see these people are no slouches. They're mining men, they're financiers, bankers in Rhyolite. At the Rhyolite Stock Exchange on March 1907, when it opened up. In all my looking for Nevada materials, I found a copy of the board of the board of directors when they established the Rhyolite Stock Exchange. And a booklet like that is just, well, you can't, it's just very, very valuable, and maybe one or two's of a kind, and probably worth well more than $1,000. There is the railroad depot that we probably all have seen. When we were going to Las Vegas High School on the weekend, we'd go on up, some of my friends, to go to Rhyolite and points further north. And then it's served very well. It's still there. After World War II, it became the Ghost Casino. And there was games inside, the card games especially. And then Mr. and Mrs. Heisler was there for a long time, and they just weaved stories about Rhyolite, little exaggeration, of course, as far as the number of things here and there, but that's all part of the fun. The bottle house is still in Rhyolite. It says 50,000 bottles over in the lower right, considerably less, but nevertheless, the point is being made. And it was livable, until about 30 years ago. Rhyolite did it all in style. The facade in the middle of the picture is still there today, the L.D. Porter building. And the circus, it was circus day in Rhyolite. The elephants are going through. And if you can imagine that today in that ghost town where, the elephants, up on the left-hand side, there's the band playing. And they've got songs like "There'll Be a Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight" and "Charmaine, Charmaine," old songs that we don't even know about today. I mean, hey, that's okay though. But you can follow this in the Tonopah and Goldfield newspapers, because they were there in Tonopah for a day or two, Goldfield, down to Rhyolite, and then they went into California, the circus at Rhyolite. Again, another parade scene. On a side street is lined with false fronted buildings. By that I mean it looks like there's room for advertising, but the second to the left you can see it's a peaked roof, but with the false front it looks like much bigger than it really is, but that's the term they used in the early days. Rhyolite had a school, and you can bet probably the man on the left is a teacher with some of the students there at Rhyolite back around 1909 or so. On a side street, this woman here is selling magazines, Elite Style, Saturday Evening Post. Yeah, it was that early, and a few others over there above. And whenever a picture, whenever a photographer is around, everyone would want to get in the picture, even the dog on the lower right here. Amusing picture. Rhyolite peaked out in 1908. The three-story bank building is prominent in the middle of the picture, just barely below the level. And the tracks of the two railroads we've been talking about, the Tonopah and Tidewater on the left, and the Las Vegas and Tonopah on the right, and that one has an engine running on it. Foundations or the railroad track is all gone, of course, but there's mounds there where the trains used to run there. That was quite a town, Rhyolite, but we must move on because Rhyolite by 1920 was a ghost town like this. The buildings are the three prominent buildings, of course, are still there today. Down at Beatty itself, and that's getting to be a pricey place in a way as far as getting motels and stuff. This is Old Man Beatty from Maine, and he's the one that sold land to Mike Montgomery and other people that helped build the town of Beatty. Beatty looked like this. The Porter store is just to the left of center, the L.D. Porter store. They had probably Nevada's first chain store, because the Porter store, here's the main headquarters in Beatty. They had a branch in Rhyolite, a little ghost town called Pioneer just above there, and a store in Las Vegas, 1905, 1910. But this is the main street, and there's some celebration going on because some of the buildings are decked out in bunting and so forth. Rhyolite was where the mines were. Beatty was where more railroad activity in the Bullfrog mining district. So in the Bullfrog here, in the middle, you can see the word Beatty because they're claiming to be, hey, this is the place, not Rhyolite, not Bullfrog, not Pioneer and those other towns, but rather Beatty. And that's one way they advertise themselves. But this is the first page of a 4-page menu booklet as to what's available at that cafe that I just showed you back there. With arms going in every direction, showing we're the heart of everything, invest here. And there's some of the interior of the menu. The steak were all like $1.75, $2. They're off the picture to the right. But they had fish there, crab, lobster, way out in the desert. We're talking about primitive place back in 1905, 1906, 07. Oysters. Wish we had these kind of prices today.
Yeah.
Here's a store in Beatty, the main one. On Railroad Day, when the Las Vegas and Tonopah Road finally reached Beatty, and it would be built all the way from Las Vegas to Tonopah eventually by 1907. Beatty had a first-class hotel, but in those standards, just like Rhyolite did, the Southern Hotel. Here's the one in Beatty. They had these cars here. Wouldn't you like to have one of those today? South of Beatty was still another town called Gold Center. And if you're in Beatty, like I was this morning, and make that big turn out of Beatty to the right, and the Amargosa River is kind of underneath you, and then goes the other side, and make a left turn before you get to the airport road, look over that area, and that's where that town sprang up. And Gold Center, buy a lot for $100. The proprietor says, here's the place, Gold Center. It turned out to be the Gold Center there's no gold there. It was all over in Rhyolite, and it was a center of nothing except for, you can see, sagebrush. But nevertheless, it was a town that lasted for a couple of years. The big thing in Gold Center, and there's a credit to the town, was the Gold Center Brewery right here. And there's still foundations of that today. And there's the whistle going on. And over on the left would be the company vehicle delivering ice and beer over to the other mining camps like Beatty and Rhyolite. And I finally found a picture of the inside. They're making ice. Now, 7 miles south of Rhyolite would be Carrera, and that was named after Carrera, Italy, which was a area where there was a lot of marble. And you can go up and there, and there's still quite a bit of marble, but it's now low grade because all the best was taken out between 1907 and 1914. It had a little railroad that ran up and down, but just steam driven. It didn't connect it connected the main line of the Las Vegas and Tonopah, 7 miles south of Beatty. But that's a nice picture made in 1914 in color. North of Rhyolite and Beatty was a place called Bonnie Claire. And I'm sure many of us have driven way too many times between Las Vegas and Reno. And you're about 30 miles north. The Scotty's Junction Road goes to the left, which is still closed several miles in. because they're still trying to restore the Cottage Castle after floods a few years ago. But those mountains in the background are very recognizable. But here's the one thing. The picture says Gold Center up there. But hey, I went out there and I even camped out there at night one time, and it's very evident it's not Gold Center. But a lot of pictures are mislabeled. And so people that dwell in history have to watch out and make sure that the facts are correct. There was a small mill there, as you can see, a little gold mill. And there's a big cellar there today. It's definitely identifiable. But that mountain range in the background, there's a better picture of it. You take the Scotty's Castle Road, only about 2-3 miles, and you're right against the big Knickerbocker mine and mill in the middle of that picture, below all that the fixtures of the mountain there. And these are long line teams. They're bringing in ore to be processed at the mill. Further to the north, there's a road leading from Lida Junction, just south of Goldfield, going into California, and there's a couple of mining camps along that road. One's called Lida, another Palmetto, and here's a picture of the inside of a meat market. And you can see the big, well, he's got eggs for sale. He's got butter and big hides of beef there. And this man right here, I interviewed him when he was 97 years old in 1969. He told me a lot of pioneer stories. Got a little baby, and it looks like the baby has a little knife on his right hand. And then his wife and the other kid are there. And his account books are there in the very front. But it's a really remarkable shot. It's amazing some of these things were ever photographed. The laundry at that place called Lida, or Palmetto rather, looked like this. Not a very good picture. Home baking at bread, pies, cake. Walk in. Well, where you walk into a tent, you can't get in too far. But nevertheless, this was at a place called Lida. Lida Junction leads you to Lida. But better still, when you're 7 miles on that road, instead of taking the road to California to the right, if you go to the left, you get to Gold Point. And that's one of Nevada's best ghost towns with more than 40 buildings. And there's still about 4 or 5 people living there. A big bar, go in, tip a few if you like. They sell a few books. Big mill at Silver Peak, which is probably the largest town in Esmeralda County for what few that live there. It's west of Goldfield by air, about 30 miles. That had all stamping operations all against the side of that hill, more than 100 stamps crushing ore day and night. And the town site is down below. But Silver Peak is where that lithium mine is. And there's another lithium mine wants to open up. A lot of controversy over some kind of weed grass or whatever you call it that has to be preserved. You know, it's supposed to be there, nowhere else in the world. Well, what's wrong with transplanting it so we can go ahead and get lithium? We need lithium to make these car batteries, right, for electric cars. And then another lithium mine is a go north of Winnemucca. The Indian tribe up there tried to stop it because it was sacred grounds, but a judge just decided in the last week, no, you guys can mine. That's good. Here's the inside of that very wheel with all those stamps of crushing apparatus and a battery underneath and a place to recover the ore. That was a big, big mill, and the foundations are extensive. This is a rare shot back in Pahrump of Shoshone picking grapes to make wine. I've been offered $400 for this picture. There's no way I'm going to let it go. It's just too nice. So even though there's a brewery out there in Pahrump today, nothing new, because this is around 1902, 1903, along with, here's a Shoshone stood still long enough to have her picture taken in Pahrump. The most historic part of Pahrump Valley is the Mance Ranch, and it's about 4 miles south of the main intersection in Pahrump, off of Mance Road. It's private, of course, but in the old days, teamsters from Las Vegas, before the railroads were built, would go Las Vegas and stop at the Mance Ranch through Pahrump, and then go on up to Beatty and Rhyolite, or from south of Prims, places called Ivanpah, Manville. I interviewed a teamster in 1969 that was about 80 years old, and he was just a boy, but he was a swamper on one of the rigs. There's the teamster who was responsible for the care of the team. And well, how do you get these teams going? Well, there was a drag line all the way through the middle to the lead horses way up on the upper left, and they at the commands of Guy and Haw, they would go left or right, and they had bells on the lead horses as well, because some of these teams would go up canyons, and if one team was going up, the bells would ring, and the team going down, so there wouldn't be any collision. So these people thought of everything insofar as transportation. Another rig over there on the right, but the Mance Ranch it's been, I have about 10 or 12 pictures of it. Here's another one. See, all these rigs would come in for the day, maybe even 2-3 days, and lay over before going from Las Vegas to Beatty. And it was very famous for its muscatel wine. And a place where people slept over and could get decent meals instead of those ones prepared way out in the desert. Pahrump saw all that kind of activity, but in the 50s, and we're of that age, we know this, Pahrump was famous for its cotton. That's practically all gone now, I believe. Pahrump has other things going. It's really a bustling, no longer a town, but a city. Death Valley is just one of a kind. I've been in deserts over in Israel, Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, but nothing is as nice as the Death Valley Desert. Here I took off in 1964, going to see a ghost town near there. That's a Goldwater sticker. Unfortunately, no, fortunately, I think but I was living in California going my last year of college at Sacramento State. And his motto was, in your heart, you know he was right. He was trying to limit the size of government. He said, for every new law I will sign into law, if I get elected, I'll repeal 2. Well, didn't work out that way because Lyndon Johnson in landslide. But I told you about Skadoo earlier. It was just a town site with the mill. There was a newer area, Skadoo, just above the old town site, was down in the flat. But that National Park Service, I took this picture in 1958. Just 2 years later, they tore down that residence house and commissary and this other building, and for no reason. I think the National Park Service can often be a little lazy by not wanting to supervise what they're charged to do, and that it would be to look over the entire monument. They felt that it would be a place where people might get in an accident or whatever, and not to worry. These buildings, they was pretty sturdy. Water tank on the Tonopah Tidewell Railroad down at Tacopa, it's all gone now. Going through Mustard Canyon north of Furnace Creek Ranch, it leads you over to the to a Harmony Borax mill. Here's some of the tanks there of it, but I thought I had a picture of the mill itself. It built in 1885. That was one of the early borax plants. It started, believe it or not, south of Fallon. Then it went to west of Tonopah, as far as mining borax. in a big flat, and there's extensive ruins of borax mills over near there. It's a big burro sanctuary as well. And then it went to Harmony, and then it went down to Boron, and Boron was the place they should have been in the first place because it's still going, getting borax. Boron is about 30 miles west of Barstow, and it's a humming place. Ballarat on the west side of the Panamint Range. Look how steep and big that Panamint Range is. You go into Death Valley, Furnace Creek Ranch, renamed, by the way, the Oasis of Death Valley. No sex to that sexy name at all. Furnace Creek Ranch was historic. And you go over Towns Pass and then you'll see Skadoo, and then Ballarat looks like this, a bunch of adobe buildings. But all those prospectors from Idaho and Oregon, Northern Nevada, they'd come down here for the winter because the weather was much better than enduring snow and cold weather up in those areas. And the Rhyolite building there is still there, looks just about like this, with the stone there in the facade, stone. It all started at the original Bullfrog mine in that Rhyolite area. Unfortunately, this is all torn down now. This is a ghost town further north than Silver Peak, Goldfield. It was an old stage station, and you can see the rock ruins, probably 19th century, and then into the 20th century, the wooden building. You can tell that by the kind of nails that hold that together. And it's interesting to study the architecture of buildings in mining camps. This looks like 3 stages. Looks like adobe way inside and up on the roof, and then a stone addition over here. In the 20th century, they added the porch, and it's all still there. It's quite a ruin north of Silver Peak. You know, you go on a road like this, and you wonder, where's it going to lead you to? It leads to adventure. So you go on this, and you'll go on up and maybe find an old mining camp, mine buildings. A mining camp is separate. That's where businesses start to flourish. And you go up here to catch the old mill called Silver Dyke. And up these stairs, you see other ruins. This old house here just shows, it's a picture of desolation. Dead trees, one tree just barely hanging on, fallen trees. But that's the fun of ghost towning and finding these old mills like this. Look how steep it is. The pictures down below is the way it looks today. North of Pioche is a place called Hamilton, the Wells Fargo building. When I was first there, even as late as 1970, the whole 2-story building was there, and only that much is left. It's disappearing fast. Another thing that's disappearing fast are relics found in mining camp. I was here at that mining camp, Hamilton, 1968, and there were 3 ore buckets like this. I didn't bother to take them away. Look, they were pretty fragile to begin with. The old Wells Fargo building is in the back. I went back to 3 years later, and all 3 were gone. Berlin is northwest of Tonopah, a little far away, but I brought this in because that's the home of the Ickasaur State Park, the big fish, the prehistoric fish. And there's the mill over there on the right, now encased in a nice building, well preserved. It's an outstanding example of a stamp mill. And the other building, the assay office and so forth. From Tonopah, it's about 45 miles northwest. Besides those stamp mills, which were pretty sophisticated, something rather crude was something called an arraster. And there's 2 of them right here. They were called a Mexican grinding wheel, a grinding mill. And what's happening is they would have these large boulders down at the bottom. There'd be a center post up the top and a cross arm across, extending beyond the limits of the raster. And the horse would go all the way around, all the way around. And he did that. The boulders tied the chains to the center post would move and crush ore. Well, you can imagine that's not very efficient, but there were quite a few. I've seen several of them in the desert during my lifetime. There's another thing that's fun. You find an old traveler's story about, well, this one was a story about a court reporter from San Francisco caught the new Central Pacific Railroad in 1870, and he got off west of Elko, a place called Palisade, caught the stage, and he said he went into Hamilton, and then he went southeast about 16 miles to find Washburn Station. Well, I wanted to go and find that. So he said it's near some pillars. And sure enough, there's the pillars. And in the background are the stone ruins of that station house. That's part of the fun of discovering things about Nevada history. Another thing is in Park Canyon near Tonopah, I had this old picture of the cable with the ore bucket, and extended from the mine further down. And I said, well, I'm going to hike down there, but it was steep. Look how steep that side is. It took about 40 minutes going downhill just to go 1/10 of a mile. That's how steep it was. And you can imagine climbing back up took longer. But we found it. Eureka, there's the ore bucket. That's me on the right.
2 years ago.
A few years ago, that's right. We started with Johnny. We're going to end with Johnny. This is the mining. It's about 10 miles north of downtown Pahrump, as I mentioned before. But all these buildings were here in 1958. I took this picture before going in the service in August of '58 for a couple of years with the Navy, and it was a very nice place to see. This is from the other direction, seeing the old buildings. And but someone told me they're all gone now. I was there in 1980. Most of them are still there. And that ends my Ghost Town, Southern Nevada Ghost Town trip show. And you can see here, this is the end. The end. Yeah, there. Well, thank you for your attention. I wish we had 80 people here like last time, or 70, but I think this too, COVID will pass and we can get back to normal someday, or maybe abnormal. Thank you again.